Wow, I'm on the last video for impedance, and I gotta tell you, this is the hardest topic in the longest stretch of lectures in the real class, and I'm feeling very sympathetic, empathetic, telepathetic for you folks at home that have watched through all this and have tried to understand it. It's complicated. I do recommend, if when it comes back around a year from now or 2 years from now, take the electronics class with me, and we'll dive into this again. And the second time around, it gets easier. Also, definitely take the speaker systems class. That's running this fall, coming up, and we revisit this in the speakers class, which is pretty interesting. So, a quick summary of amp to loudspeaker relationships. This thing in white up here is a output of a spec sheet for a Mackie power amp. And it's telling you, and you'll see this on a lot of power amps. Anybody who does car audio might be familiar with this. Some of you might already be familiar with this overall paradigm of amps and speakers, but it's telling me here what the amp can do. And it's saying, look, if I see 8 ohms, I'm going to deliver 500 watts per channel. And if I see 4 ohms, I'm going to deliver 700 watts per channel because it's going to be a lower wattage, a lower impedance is going to pull more current from me. So that's kind of interesting. It's telling you what it can do. And then, of course, you look at the speaker itself, and the speaker's saying, look, I'm a 4 ohm loudspeaker, and I'm can handle 260 watts max or 50 watts nominal. And I'm not going to get into why there's 260 and why there's 50 watts. That's for speaker systems. But it does give you a value here, and your job is to kind of like pick which loudspeaker to goes with which amplifier, and it's pretty confusing. So my question is for you, now that you've sat through an hour and a half of speaker systems, of impedance lectures, and I'm looking here at the back. I think this is a SVT, some sort of bass amp, and it's showing me that it's telling me what it does. It says 150 watts at 8 ohms, 300 watts at 4 ohms, but buddy, don't go below 4 ohms. I'm asking you a question. What is the amp's output impedance? What is the amp's source impedance? And some of you might say, yeah, it's 8 ohms, it's 4 ohms, but it's not. That is telling you what the amp can do with a certain load impedance of the speaker. It doesn't tell you. In fact, the manual doesn't tell you. All this BS that I'm bothering you about, they don't tell you for amplifiers. And you can read between the lines. I know that solid state amps are almost 0 ohm. They're op amp based, they're transistor based. So we're talking 1/10 of an ohm. Tube amps are typically in the 2 ohm range. That might tell you right now that this is probably a tube amp, because 1 to 2 is going to be about the minimum impedance range it can do. But when you do that, when you go down to 4 ohms, maybe this is solid state. I really can't tell you. You know what? It's probably a solid state. When you go below 1 to 10 between amp and speaker, you're gonna see a lot of sound quality changes on a guitar amp, and that's on purpose. And that, in fact, is what we try to do with guitar amps and bass amps. We try to get them just about ready to blow up. And that's where all the awesome distortion comes out. All that great tube sound is the tubes just rocking, burning up. So anyway, we don't actually know the output impedance. And this gets us that's getting more complicated. I'd love to be in class right now and ask how many people have guitar amps and what kind of guitar amps you have. We can have this great conversation in person, but we can't because I'm doing this in recording. Hopefully you can ask some questions. But this is the back of a Mesa Boogie, and a Mesa Boogie shows you some really kind of cryptic things. This is the 8 ohm port, this is the 4 ohm port, and this is another 4 ohm port. But then it says use with 2 8 ohm loudspeakers. So that's pretty confusing. What does that mean? Well, this is definitely a tube amp, and they're telling you what kind of speaker goes into that hole. They are not telling you the output impedance of this hole. They're telling you what kind. So if you have a single 8 ohm loudspeaker, i.e. a single 12-inch speaker in the cabinet, it's a combo amp, it gets plugged in there. But if you're driving 2 loudspeakers, 2 8 ohm loudspeakers, they're going to become 4 ohms, and these are the jacks you plug into. Well, why not just Y them out of this jack? Well, the amplifier is designed to give a particular sound, and these are different taps out off the output transformer, which is hanging off the power tubes. And by using these particular jacks, you're going to get the most ideal sound that Mesa is trying to give you. So the only real rule here is that don't go below 4 ohms. Don't put 4 loudspeakers on this or you'll blow the thing up. You can go higher. Despite what they tell you on the internet, you can plug 16 ohm cabs here, and you can definitely plug 8 ohm cabs here, because that's actually what they're telling you to do. But if you go lower than this, the potential for blowing up the amplifier is there. And going higher, you just won't get the magic sound. And another thing here is like, you plug in more speakers, the amp gives more power, and this is not a free lunch. You don't get to a place where it just gets louder for free. It overdrives the amplifier, and this can cause clipping, and the frequency response can change, transient response can change, shut down, equipment damage, blow up, fire. In a guitar amp, maybe that's kind of cool for a live sound show where you got a bunch of amplifiers driving PA speakers. That's just wicked expensive and bad. So clipping is an interesting thing. You drive a sine wave into an amplifier, and the amplifier has what's called voltage rails. It's the power supply input to the amplifier. And these lines here say, look, these are the limitations of the power amp. This is what the power supply can provide. And you put in this sine wave and you say, hey, let me turn up this sine wave more, and boom, there's your clipping. It gives the devil's haircut to the sine wave. And because the power supply cannot reproduce an output the input signal, because it's getting chopped off. We call that hitting the rails or clipping, and that's where the clipping is. And of course, this creates a square wave, and square waves have harmonics. And so you get all that buzzy, awesome distortion that Metallica is famous for. We call that squaring off the signal. Another way to look at this would be, look, here's an 8 ohm. This is a power amplifier chart, and at 8 ohms, it provides up to about 200 watts, and then it just suddenly clips. Because this is your percentage of distortion on the y-axis. And above this, in 4 ohm mode, the amplifier naturally has more distortion at 4 ohms. It can get more powerful, right? It's pushing up to 600 ohms, 600 watts. The amplifier gets louder and more powerful at 4 ohms, but its distortion is up immediately. And of course, clipping is still clipping. So you don't get a free lunch. Another way to look at this free lunch is, here's a 200 watt output of a power amplifier. And if you decide to clip it, you're already running it at max output. It's 200 watts RMS. And you put in just a little bit more input signal, and it hits its voltage rails, starts passing direct current, which is essentially what this is here, a square wave. You're clipping it. And of course, you're going to hear distortion, right? And you know that. But this is actually what the speaker sees. The speaker's trying to move forward and backward with a square wave. Even though the square wave may only have this like 200 watt, 250 watt output from the amplifier, it's actually an RMS. When you actually do, it's no longer a sine wave, so you have to do the RMS, and there's more data, there's more time spent at the extents. We call that the duty factor has gone up, or the crest factor. We see significantly higher RMS wattage or RMS voltage. So this poor speaker blows up, which gets me, I think, to almost the last slide of this whole entire thing, which is there's 2 ways to blow a speaker. One is that too much voltage can really or too much power can blow the speaker. Like, you're just too damn powerful, and boom, it's blown up, and goodbye. And another way, which I think this is actually the more common way the speakers are blown, is that you just take an amplifier and you're doing a show, or you're doing karaoke or whatever, and you're at the local bar, I don't know, Patty Murphy's, and you turn it all the way up. And you turn it all the way up, that poor little amplifier just goes into clipping. And even though the speaker could handle that amplifier, because that amplifier is now making a square wave, that speaker is getting a much higher RMS, and the speaker blows up. So wimpy power amplifiers are actually the greatest risk. They can blow any speaker. And so you want to really be careful about that. Of course, a really powerful amplifier at Patty Murphy's would have gotten turned up as well and would have blown the speaker, so that analogy doesn't work. But there you go. Oh my God, we have gotten through all 97 slides, and that was a very long lecture. I hope you broke it up over time. I hope some of it you retain. I hope you want to follow with me on some other cool classes on this kind of stuff, because It's really cool, and there's a lot of work out there in the nerdery, and it's super interesting, and all that. Good. Bye bye.